Hi, I'm Steve Acuna, your host of the 30-Minute Sage, your source of practical advice to move forward through corporate and life changes. I come to you as a certified professional in change management and life coaching with over 25 years of boots on the ground and leadership experience that spans 5 corporate industries. This podcast explores the challenges of leading corporate teams through change with the audacious goal to apply techniques and wisdoms that go well beyond the workplace and into daily life. Along the way, I will share my successes and failures, my learnings and my truths as I continue to transcend corporate life and apply my personal mission to raise consciousness that activates the power of our human community. Welcome to the 30-Minute Sage. Now let's get started. Welcome to Episode 8, Hesitancy, Fear, and Bravery. Hey, before we get into the content, let's talk about the format of the podcast. First off, the podcast is casual, so it's like a conversation, cuts down on heavy production, and this helps me to focus on sharing and content. In this episode, I'll talk about my experiences with behaviors that prevent or limit positive outcomes, with specific focus on how hesitancy and fear affect the ability to be brave in the workplace or life in general. It's my hope that you test these ideas and apply what makes sense to your situation, that process I call finding your inner sage. As always, I'll share a takeaway after each segment so you have something you can reflect on afterwards. And please don't forget, send the comments, hit the like button, and share it with others to help promote the podcast. Finally, this podcast is not therapy. Change management can be emotionally charged, so if you're not emotionally okay, please seek the professional assistance you need. Professional therapy has helped me and my family through tough times, so remember, it's okay to not be okay. All right, let's get into segment 1, hesitancy. Hesitancy is complex. There's so many reasons why one would be hesitant in a decision or action, but it really comes down to a slowness in acting or deciding due to doubt or uncertainty. And I'll talk about my own experiences and how it's actually served me. Over the years, I've become less hesitant for a number of reasons, in many ways. Familiarity is one. I've been in a situation many times, and I have a little bit more trust in kind of some outcomes or anticipated outcomes given the situation that I'm experiencing. I also have learned to trust in my own experiences, abilities, expertise in a way that allows me to think about risks in a different way. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but it's really understanding how fear has kind of played a role in my life and what it has done to either prevent or even help me in some ways. But when it comes to that particular element of expertise and trusting in yourself, it's really important to also recognize the fact that that's kind of an underpinner to really give you an understanding and assessment of how you feel about your own situation and how you can trust in your abilities to get through it. So there's a lot of components with this one, but it's also some great opportunities for learning. The thing that I talked about before about benefits and things associated with being hesitant or in the moment of hesitancy, when I feel the moment of hesitancy because of some new situation, it makes me curious about what's creating it. And that's the defining moment that really tells me a little bit more about my ability to adapt. And so it's a great opportunity to think about it in the moment if you have time, because obviously, depending on the circumstances, you may not have time. It could be a dangerous situation even. And in this case, you don't want to be thinking too much and you don't want to be too slow in that situation. So keep that in mind. It's all circumstantial. So when it comes to that situation of observing, though, and asking the question, what's creating hesitancy? What's making me pause at this moment? Is it fear related? Is it a real thing? Is it actually true? All of these things give me insight into what I need to work on. And so it's really a moment in time that I think is critically important for to be reflective and to also understand what's driving it and what's the intention here that you're trying to get to. Okay, so it's not always bad. It's not always bad. It can be about how risk adverse you are too, which gives you a good yardstick. And I'm not saying everyone has to be risk adverse. I mean, everyone's different. And I'm not suggesting that any behavior is better than another. But if there are risks that would be beneficial to take, because it's actually promoting professional growth or personal growth, or it's just something that's helping you get through a certain point in your life where you're stuck, or in your career and you're stuck. These are the kinds of things that help you to understand where you stand in regards to adapting to situations. So in other words, it provides a yardstick of where you're at, and given where you want to be. Okay, so it's not a bad thing to recognize, again, if you have the time to actually analyze why you feel hesitant. So, some of the questions that come up: are you missing out on an opportunity? That you might want to dig a little bit deeper into what hesitancy is creating for you, and maybe constraining your life in some ways. Do you feel stuck in routine? Is another question that comes up when it comes to being hesitant or always feeling hesitant. How can you make small changes? That's the other piece that I always ask myself. It's like, if I feel like I need to grow through this in some way, and I'm constantly hesitant given this circumstance, are there small things I can do to kind of give myself a little bit more of a chance to learn, a chance to grow and to develop a little bit more muscle, if you will, around the situation? And these are things that really are great for understanding risk tolerance and your ability to take on different risks that actually could promote a great benefit for you in your professional life or personal life. So I always kind of ask these things of myself to really understand what it can teach me. It's not always bad either. I'm going to tell you a quick story. I was in a situation with my wife, and it was Christmas, and we were taking some pies and gifts over to her parents' house. And it's kind of a weird story, so it's just stay with me here. So I stop at a stoplight. And there's no traffic because it was like on a weekend that year, and it was, I think it was even like a Sunday, so it was very, very slow. And we were up early, so we were driving out early, so there was really nobody on the roads. And I was sitting at a red light, and my wife and I were talking, and the light turned green. And I just kind of waited, and I started daydreaming for a moment, and I was just like, gosh, I just was lost in my thoughts, and I just kind of came to, and my wife looked at me and said, are you going to go? Are you going to move forward? What's going on? You okay? And I was like, yeah, of course. And I kind of shook my head and just kind of woke up a little bit and said, okay, yeah. So then I waited one more second, and a car ran the red light and went right through the intersection that we would have gone through at that same time. And the car must have been going about 50, 60 miles per hour. There's no doubt in my mind that hesitancy probably saved my life, because I think it would have just T-boned perfectly right on the door, right on my side. So it would have been devastating, a terrible crash. And so I stopped for a moment, and I just took a breath, and I was just like, wow, that's amazing. And it was quite lucky that I actually hesitated for a moment. Now, that's a pretty extreme example, and it's certainly not a work-related one. This is really one that's about danger, right? This is one that's about devastating accident. So, it's a different circumstance, but it tells me also that hesitancy could also be about timing, and that's also important to note. Now, I'm not going to suggest that that could have been just straight up luck. Some people might even say that was divine intervention, or, all of these things that could be interpreted. But what it told me, though, is that timing is also a part of this. And you can also be thinking that hesitancy could be putting you in the right time frame for something that's impactful or positive for your life or for your profession. So just keep that in mind. So it's not always bad. It's not something you're always trying to work through. But if you learn from it, and you have intention about trying to move forward in a positive way, it'll help you grow in different ways, and it can mold itself around what you need to know in those circumstances, if you can be inquisitive and curious at the same time. So this brings me to takeaway number 1. The moment of hesitancy is a sacred point in time, because it gives you an opportunity to assess where you stand with your ability to move past doubt and uncertainty. So again, the takeaway number 1, the moment of hesitancy is a sacred point in time, because it gives you an opportunity to assess where you stand with your ability to move past doubt and uncertainty. Hesitancy is something that you can look at as a teacher as well. Now, again, let me remind you, hesitancy can also be something that's really important for your own safety. So what we're really talking about here is the hesitancy that's created by uncertainty and fear. And the next segment, we'll talk a little bit more about fear and the contribution of fear in a way that can be positive and sometimes can hinder your growth in your personal and professional life. All right, let's get into segment 2, fear. Now, this is a really interesting subject and one that we're all familiar with. So there's a lot of interpretation about what fear is and how it's created. I'm going to just focus on my own experiences on this one, and you can have your own interpretation of fear and how it's shown up in your life as well. It's something we all have in common. You know, fear is something that just is part of life, and in many respects, it's something that we can all learn from as well. And I want to talk a little bit more about that and what I've learned from it as well. You know, it's a distressing emotion, and it's typically aroused by impending danger, pain, bad things that could be coming that you kind of anticipate from a circumstance, from a situation. It could be a threat that could be real, such as in a dangerous situation, or it can be completely imagined. And what's really interesting is the response could be exactly the same. And that's what makes fear such an interesting subject to discuss. You know, in my experiences with fear, it's about the unknown. It's about not being sure. In the last segment, we talked about hesitation and the hesitancy that one could experience in a risky situation. You know, fear is something that also is part of the contributing factors of hesitancy. And I focused less on fear in the last segment because I knew we were going to talk about it in this one. And so when I talk about fear of the unknown, there's a lot of things that go through my head in particular. Some of it is usually worst case situations. And much of it, I'll say the majority of it isn't even true. It's not even going to happen that way. And I'm kind of trying to anticipate the worst situation so I can emotionally be in a better space to handle it. And I think sometimes that gets a little extreme for me, at least. And sometimes it turns into a little bit too much thinking about that. And that's something I've worked on. And maybe some of you have that in common with me. But I do recognize that as something my response tends to be when it comes to fear. The fear of the unknown aspect of it is really something that I think all of us can identify with. You know, we don't always know what's going to happen in a situation, and there's a concern about what could happen. I've been in situations and in past segments and episodes that I've shared with personal situations. There's been a lot of fear of unknown in the challenges and struggles that I've shared in this podcast. And most of them are really situations that can be in some way or another managed, handled, supported. And there are situations where the unknown could produce something that is completely different and new that is very difficult to manage and handle. And I recognize that, and I want to acknowledge that. So this isn't a catch-all, and I'm not trying to overgeneralize situations that people go through in life that could be pretty significant and serious. But for me, that whole concept of unknown is really allowing my imagination or my thoughts to just go and run on their own to the situation that's really not productive for me or the circumstance. So how do we deal with that? Well, first of all, I just recognize the fact that that's my response. I tend to worry about those kinds of situations, and I tend to overthink them. So I automatically start to observe myself under the condition of fear. And the unknown component, as I mentioned before, when I've had those situations, they typically have not happened the way I thought they would, which is generally the worst case situation. Okay. So that's something I want to just kind of mention when it comes to that. What it also does though, is it increases focus, it increases response, intention, direction setting. It's something that actually activates in my situation, it activates awareness It's almost like this extra sensory type of space that you get into where things are just clearer, and call it adrenaline, whatever the physical response is, it pulls you right into the moment. And that moment becomes the world around you. And that could be a really good thing, especially if it's a situation that requires that type of attention. It can also be debilitating too. And for me, it has created hesitation. It's created uncertainty sometimes as well. So that's just something I've observed in myself as well. I have this small short story. When I was a kid, I was in martial arts, and we used to do these sparring sessions, and we also do tournaments where we'd spar against you. Sparring is like, controlled competition, and it's controlled fighting, if you will. So it's not meant to hurt. It's really meant to be competitive and to see how fast your reactions are, and it's fun. It's fun, provided it's controlled setting and everyone recognizes that it's a competition. So I was in this competition. It was the first competition I was in. And this kind of tells me about, what fear is really like for me when I was younger. I was facing this individual. I think I was like 13, 14, and I was kind of skinny and scrawny, maybe not scrawny, but skinny for sure. But I was facing this opponent in this tournament, and I turned to the side to see him, and he looked like a 21-year-old man, and he was only 14. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I am fighting a monster right here. And there was a lot of fear that I started to feel, because I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not ready for this guy. This guy's like twice my size. He looks like, the same size as my father. And I didn't know how to handle. So I had to take a deep breath and recognize the fact that this is fear. This is what fear is doing. And it made me sharp. It made me. Now, I still lost the match. No, I mean, the guy was really great, and he was twice my size. But I did my best, and I know I did my best, because fear actually put me in that mode. It made me respond faster than I ever would, think faster than I ever would, and it created a situation where I actually did better than I thought I would. Okay, so keep that in mind. So fear is not a bad thing. We all know that. But in the moment, it's like you're in a different space and a different perspective. And in that moment, geez, I wanted to go out the door. I wanted to run out the door. I was thinking, what am I doing this for? Is this really what I want to be getting into here? And so all that stuff happened. But what a growth opportunity I had in that moment. And I still carry that story all through these years. Why? Because it taught me something really important about myself and my ability to persevere and move through fear. Okay, so it can also save your life, as I mentioned about hesitancy. Sometimes the timing aspect of it, the fear creates a hesitancy that actually produces the right timing for a circumstance to be a stroke of luck or something that actually helps you. Okay, but it can also really limit you in many respects, and the limiting factor for me was the avoidance aspect of it. Because I knew I would feel fear in a circumstances, I wouldn't try. I wouldn't even give it a shot. So this brings me to takeaway number 2, which is, let's face it, fear can save your life when you're in danger. But when you're not in danger, it can open a new perspective of what needs to change in one's life. So again, let's face it, fear can save your life when you are in danger. But when you're not in danger, it can open new perspectives of what needs to change in one's life. Keep in mind that it will teach you some things about yourself that you never would have experienced before under normal circumstances. So just know that it is a benefit if you keep the right intention and the right frame of mind. All right, let's get into segment 3, bravery. Now, this is a great subject because it's really something that I always strive to better understand how I can flip the switch and be more brave in situations where fear has been a part of the circumstance. So with bravery, we're really talking about being strong in the face of fear. And, the last segment I talked about, a funny story about being in a tournament, martial art tournament, and facing this really huge opponent that he just scared me. Yeah, this guy just freaked me out because I thought to myself, wow, I'm going to get hurt somehow. And all these things went through my head that, there's no way I'm going to be able to hold my own against somebody who is twice my size. And so that kind of fear was something that created a situation where I was just a lot of doubt, a lot of hesitancy came through. And I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to do well here. And I might even get hurt in the circumstance. So all these things went through my head. And that's all within like the first half a second, seeing this person. But what's also interesting is the moment where I took a deep breath and I said, I'm moving forward. I'm going to stay in this, and I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to accept the fact that I'm afraid, but I'm still going to move forward. And so somewhere in that time frame, whether it was milliseconds or whatever it was, there was a point in my mind where I decided that I was going to do this, and that moment was what really defined bravery for me, because I was fearful. I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, I could have been that the person could accidentally, not pull a punch back or something like that with full power and hurt me, and I wouldn't be able to stop it. But I had to believe in myself to think that I could stop it, that I could actually affect the situation, that I could actually win this match. And that moment, and I also had a great coach. My instructor, I vividly remember him yelling my name, and he saw this opponent. It was like, and I know he was thinking, oh no, this is not looking good for Steve. But I looked at him, and he looked at me dead in the eye. He says, you could do this. You could do this. I've seen you do this. And he said it, and it was like all the other noises and conversations and sounds just kind of faded away, and I heard him. And then I believed it. And that's the moment where I became brave. That's the moment where I realized that I could actually persevere in the situation and maybe even win. And that's the hope component that made me stop thinking about whether or not I was going to win. Actually, to some point, I actually got to a point where it's like, I don't even care if I win or lose. I'm going for it, right? I'm going to do what I can do, and I'm going to do my best. And it was all within those few seconds that made me realize that that's a life lesson. And it was a strategic moment in my life to actually teach me what it meant to move forward with bravery. So bravery is an interesting one because it's really about understanding what's preventing you from moving forward, what's stopping you from those limiting beliefs that you have in yourself, the self-doubt. And I've talked quite a bit about self-doubt in a few segments now, because it really is a debilitating factor when it comes to moving forward and actually showing the bravery that you can have in a moment where you perhaps don't believe you can move forward. Okay. So that's the example that I really think that that really kind of demonstrates and illustrates exactly how I felt or what the situation was in that moment. Now, I've also felt that kind of same thing and I've talked about public speaking in a previous segment. I've had those similar feelings, but because I was able to overcome a situation of fear with bravery, it was almost like I remembered that situation. In fact, I recalled that moment in that martial art situation when I would actually be afraid or fearful of an outcome or worried about how I would do in a presentation at work. And I talked about that early in my career, and what caused that in an experience in college. So look back on those older episodes, and you'll understand the storyline here. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that there's a way for you to persevere through it, and there's a way to do that with intention, and bravery is the outcome of that. Okay. There's one more element I want to talk about in this particular segment, which I think is kind of interesting. It's the whole concept of actually getting to a point where you almost don't care what happens. You just need to act. You need to move forward, and you set your direction, and you're just focused on that direction. Like that's a piece that's really hard to articulate in this segment, but it's almost like this detachment, and it's a moment where you feel as though it doesn't matter. You're going to do it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. If it does work out, it doesn't matter, because you know it's the right thing to do for you in that moment, or for someone else in that moment. And you are the one to do it. And that's the kind of stuff that is really hard to put a finger on, to say, let's do more of that. It's almost like a self-taught kind of response, or it's an awareness that really kind of comes through the experience of actually moving past fear and into something that's actually brave. Okay. Bravery can also be about using your voice. That's another aspect in the workplace, and tying it back to the workplace. I've seen folks that really, I could see the fear in the fact that they don't want to be in a position where somebody calls them out or makes them feel like they don't know what they're talking about, or all these negative things we talked about, in past segments too, about bad behavior in management, leadership, or even in just in the workplace, that can create a situation where you just don't want to do anything with it, because it's just easier to not do anything than to worry about the fear that it creates, and also how you clear the hurdle of becoming brave. It's just easier to just not act, right? But that's the piece, though. That's the opportunity that we need to blow that up into something that's more about how do we isolate on that, so that we can actually, in some respects, be prepared for those moments, right? That's the kind of stuff I think is really important. And using your voice and assertion is something I've also seen as something that folks have limited themselves with in regards to just not participating. Better to not say anything, because if I say something, then it's going to create some kind of response, and that response might not be favorable for me, or it might call me out in something that I'm uncertain about, or I'm worried about. These kinds of thoughts and these thought forms that we're creating in ourselves, I think in a lot of respects kind of show up in that bridge work from fear to bravery. And so why I mention all of this is because it's a very much a self-evaluation situation, as it was for me. And not everyone's going to be able to provide answers to say, do these 3 things and you'll be perfect every time. You will be brave. It's more about a choice that you're making in that millisecond of a moment where you have an opportunity to actually persevere and win, and to move forward and to be successful. Okay. So bravery is something that I'm always watching for. As far as moments in time where I can actually demonstrate it for myself. And why that's also important is because demonstration of bravery is a demonstration for others to follow. And I think it's really important to understand that modeling component is something that we need more of in this world. We need more brave people that use their voice in the right ways to help this world move forward, to help people move forward, to make a positive work environment, to create a positive effect in the family environment. All of these things are opportunities that we all have. I know we all have. I have. And I'm always going to try to seek those opportunities with intention so that I can try to move things forward and create something more positive. Okay. So I challenge you to think about it in that way and see how it works for you. Okay. Now this brings me to takeaway number 3, which is surrender your self-doubt and limiting beliefs. Your bravery has been waiting for you and has something to say. So again, takeaway number 3, surrender your self-doubts and limiting beliefs. Your bravery has been waiting for you and has something to say. I hope that you enjoyed this segment, and I hope that you've gained some new insights from these subjects. I would hope also that you test these for yourself. It's not about what you hear from me or from my experiences that matter. It's about what you gain as far as insights into the experiences that you will face and what you learn from them. So use these opportunities of fear to understand what creates the hesitancy. And then ask yourself, what will it take to be brave in this situation? What's preventing me from being brave in every situation? And that is the lesson that I've learned in my life, to always be inquisitive, to always think about new ways for me to develop in a personal and professional way. Everything is waiting for you. So let's step out of the way of ourselves and move forward with bravery. All right, let's go ahead and do a summary of our episode. In segment 1, Hesitancy, I talked about the act of observing one's hesitancy to give valuable insights into behaviors, thoughts, or responses that prevent personal and professional growth. I also talked about how hesitancy is not necessarily a bad thing under the right circumstances, and how it could even provide positive timing outcomes. The fear response was also introduced into the mix as a strong contributing factor. The takeaway was, the moment of hesitancy is a sacred point in time because it gives you an opportunity to assess where you stand with your ability to move past doubt and uncertainty. In segment 2, Fear, I discussed the moment of fear and how it can be beneficial in dangerous situations by bringing the needed focus and energy to a person. I also discussed the fear of the unknown, and I shared my own experiences of fear as a young person and how I still carry the lessons of that strategic moment in my life. The takeaway was, let's face it, fear can save your life when you're in danger. When you're not in danger, it can open a new perspective of what needs to change in one's life. And finally, in segment 3, Bravery, I talked about the moments when one moves forward through fear into bravery by believing that success is possible. And I even took it further to the very moment of bravery when I felt detached and even cared less about the positive or negative outcomes, and the focus of doing what I know is needed to help myself and someone else was primary. The takeaway was more of a contemplation, which was, surrender your self-doubt and limiting beliefs. Your bravery has been waiting for you and has something to say. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to you joining me next time.